14-year-old Misty Copsey disappeared one night in 1992.
Police thought she was a runaway and failed to properly investigate.
Now, decades later, can one intrepid investigator solve the case?
We're doing a recap of Who Took Misty Copsey on this episode of So Much Crime,
So Little Time. If you, like me, sometimes need to look up the synonym of some word, and you go to Google and look up a synonym as you're giving out to someone for using a silly word when they're writing you a script, while you're there, while you're Googling it, why don't you also put in patreon.com/so much crime, so little time? You won't make a mistake in that spelling, and also you'll get a chance to get something fun out of it. Instead of being annoyed at someone for using a word to purposely trip you up because they know you won't be able to pronounce it, and you'll get annoyed because it's slightly obnoxious. You'll get to chat with us online. One person who can sometimes use words that will annoy you, and one person who doesn't. You'll also get some bonus content, some outtakes, and more time machine clips, which seem to be, a bit of a fan favorite. There's also an option for exclusive swag, like t-shirts from our show, maybe even some hats. And help. You'll also get that warm and fuzzy feeling for help supporting our show. Probably the same feeling that Jeff gets from inserting a word that he knows I'm going to trip up over into a script and seeing me squirm and get pissed off when I'm about to read it. Thanks so much.
Wow, that came from a place of darkness.
Welcome to So Much Crime, So Little Time. I'm Dee.
And I'm Jeff, and I'm going to use small words. Before we start, just a quick warning.
Oh, we're angry tonight. Warning.
This episode is going to have spoilers for Who Took Misty Copsey. We're going to discuss the whole series.
If you haven't listened yet, check out our preview episode on this show. It's the one before this one in your feed.
And we also put a link for the series in our show notes. Before we get to our discussion, though, Dee, tell us a little bit about this podcast.
This podcast was released in 2025. The host is Sarah Cailean. It's a follow-up for Who Killed Jennifer Judd, which we covered in April of 2025. This series has 8 episodes in around 45 minutes, give or take. But Jeff, tell us a little bit about the story as we hear it from episode 1.
Yeah, so in our preview, we discussed what happened in episode 1. Basically, we learned about 14-year-old Misty Copsey. She went to the Washington State Fair in Western Washington, in Puyallup, Washington, but she never made it home. So then we heard about her mother, Diana, who was convinced that someone had taken Misty, but the cops unfortunately seemed to be convinced that Misty was just a runaway. We heard about Diana basically kind of working the case. She was tracking down a bunch of leads, including Trina, who was the friend that Misty had gone to the fair with, Ruben, who was a guy that Misty called for a ride. Diana also found the bus driver who Misty talked to, but unfortunately the bus route wasn't the one she needed to get home. By the end of the episode, basically, we know Misty was never found, but we did hear about Diana, along with some searchers, finding the jeans and socks and underwear that Misty was wearing that were kind of in the woods off the side of the road near where other abducted girls had been found. But that's kind of where it ended. That was kind of a lot of story in the first episode. We listened to 7 more episodes. Dee, I kind of want to pick back up with what we were talking about in our preview, but do you have strong feelings about where we should start?
No, I think you have a lot of strong feelings. I think you probably have a lot of questions. Basically, Jeff, you lead this. You just give me some questions and thoughts and commentary, and I'll respond.
Well, in the preview, I asked you, why are we listening to this? Why this story? Why? Just why, I guess. And I am curious what you think, having listened to the whole thing. Why did we listen to this? What? I don't know. I guess maybe a better question is, what branch of true crime is this? Like, if we were to make like groupings of types of stories, of types of series, where would you classify this? Like there's cold cases, right? Like this is in the folder of cold cases, but then I think there's like subfolders of cold cases, right? There's ones that get solved, the Matthew Hutchinson cases. There's ones that don't get solved, but then within the ones that don't get solved, I feel like there are ones that, I don't know, have a sort of satisfying journey through the case and through the story and through some promising leads. And then there's ones, and this is where I'm putting this one, that are a cold case, don't get solved, and I don't know that we're any closer to solving it by the end of it. I feel like the investigation chased down a variety of things that maybe seemed a little bit promising, but in the end, kind of nothing happened. That's my takeaway. Can you
define satisfying there? Like, what do you mean by?
Oh, like if the case doesn't actually get solved. I mean, obviously a case getting solved, like figuring out who did it, you know, if someone is missing and like a body gets recovered, like that's one grouping. But I think absent that, there could at least be, I'm trying to think of an example of one. I feel like we've listened to some cold case ones where there was at least some sort of emotional closure for family or people close to the victim. Tell me if I'm misremembering this, but I feel like the coldest case in Laramie was one where it packed more of an like emotionally satisfying arc, or it had more of an emotionally satisfying arc than this one.
I feel like that's a little bit what's the word I want to use here? Maybe seeing as you're like a thesaurus, you can help me with the words.
Intrepid.
I feel like that's a little bit of a, not selfish, but I feel like you're focused on like you, not you personally, but like you as the listener being satisfied by the story. I think that's the guise that you're going in with, which makes me feel like you're going in with this as if it's like a novel or as if it's a story that is a work of fiction. And I find that interesting. Obviously, I know that you're not. I know that you're being critical of this as true crime. You've listened to how many of them now, Jeff? With me, alongside me. So I know that that's not where you're going, but that's what I'm taking from what you're saying. And I feel like I don't agree. I feel that while I do have some questions over the ending and over where I would put this, I still, I don't know, I think the idea of closure, I felt, was it in the Jacob Weatherling case? I remember us remarking that his mother had said, people kept saying, do you now feel like you have closure? And maybe it was his dad. I can't remember. They were like, closure doesn't exist. Like, okay. His mother said closure would be if it took me back to being the person I was when he was abducted, the person that had him there, that person, that would be closure. This isn't closure. And so I don't know what you went in expecting, and I don't know what kind of criteria it would have to fill for it to be satisfying.
No, I think you're a little bit right and a little bit wrong, or maybe I didn't say that very well, but I think you're right on some level. I think I am looking for something that is a little bit selfish and is a little bit self-serving about like what
self-serving. Like, that's I think what the phrase is thinking of.
Yeah, like what I would get out of a movie or a novel that I'm reading. Mm-hmm. But I also feel like I was listening to this thinking about, we often talk about what it's like for the people who participate in these podcasts, who talk to the reporters or the investigators. And if I'm Colton, so Misty's brother, and I've spent a good chunk of my life thinking about this case, wanting it to be solved, I feel like what happened here was an investigator came in, made some big promises or big statements about what she was going to do or what she was going to try to do and how important this was to her and how this case will never be closed for her and how she solved so many cases. She's worked so many cold cases. And she kind of stirred the pot a bunch. She brought in some other people who maybe didn't know about this, like the couple that owns the farm and people like that who maybe weren't at all connected or aware of the story, and now they're sort of invested in it. And she chased down a lot of leads that didn't go anywhere, and then she just walks away. And I know she said she'll continue to work on this case in some way, but I guess I'm a little skeptical of that. Like, will she? I feel like she more just like opened a bunch of doors and then turned on a bunch of lights and then left the house. And these folks, I feel like, had their sort of emotions played with, and they didn't kind of get anything from that. Like the couple that lives on that farm still thinks there's a body on that farm. They got their yard dug up. They got the old septic tank dug up. They know maybe those mines are hiding something. But then the podcast is done. She had to fly back home. So they're just sort of left to wonder. That's my concern.
Yeah, and I suppose, I don't know, I don't want to be too harsh, but like I completely disagree with basically everything you're saying.
Wow, really?
I think a person that I think we often say is like the detective to beat is Matt Hutchison, who, if anyone has never heard about him before,
Sunnyvale Zone.
Sunnyvale Zone. He has been pivotal apparently in many cold cases, but in particular with the Carnstitt cold case, it was Jeff, was it 42 years? 42 is in my head.
It was 1980, 1980-ish, I think.
Okay. So a decades old case, and he cracks it basically. Incredible. If you haven't listened yet, please listen to our coverage of it.
It's episode 14 from June 7th.
Episode 4. Okay. It's episode 14, June 7th, 2024. Please do listen to it. Like this guy was unreal. But what we saw there was the case being cracked. And so what I think you're being unfair at here is like Sarah Cailean is coming in and you're just kind of being a bit cynical that like, well, we don't know if she's going to come back. Why the fuck would she do all this if she's like just going to like feck around with people? Like she was a detective. Like she has, from everything we're seeing, gone in and tried to solve cases before. So I don't know why you go in. It feels like you go in with this feeling that she's kind of like a phony, like a
carpetbagger.
I don't know. I feel like that's not a nice word. That's a bad word, isn't it?
It's a historical term.
Okay.
For someone who kind of comes into an area, makes their money off of it, and then leaves.
Okay. Well, I feel like we were, I don't know. I just don't really understand your cynicism on it. And like, even if she ends it here, even if that is the case, at least someone came in and fucking spoke about it. Because one thing that will not happen here is Misty Copsey's body will not be found and her murder will not be solved if nobody speaks about it.
Sure, that's true. That's fair. But I think, and this is where I'm thinking back to other cold case podcasts we've listened to, I don't feel like she left an active, like she kickstarted an investigation by the police. I don't feel like, like I don't feel like she left this town with kind of the tools in place or the action in place for things to carry on without her. I feel like she came in, she got her podcast. I guess that's part of my cynicism, was I feel like if a different approach to this would have been to say, hey, I didn't actually solve anything. We didn't find Misty. We didn't get a confession. We didn't get an arrest. Therefore, I'm going to hold on to this podcast and not try to profit off of this until I actually do something meaningful for this case, other than just like, I don't feel like this is one of those cases where it's about bringing attention to it. There are those cases where like part of the point is just making more people aware. I didn't get that from this one.
Yeah,
did you? Like, did you feel like that was part of the goal, was just to bring attention to the case?
I feel like the episode 1, part of it was she said that she was never going in expecting to solve it, but she was trying to go in and get some answers. And I feel like a lot of answers. I felt like we got a lot of answers here.
Like what? What were answers we got?
So, first of all, we got a fact that the police basically ruled out the clothes, which was bonkers. Like, insane.
Was it
Like,
bonkers, though?
Yeah.
I don't know about that. I have questions about those clothes.
Oh, okay. Hit me with it because, okay, go on. I have so many thoughts on this.
So Misty goes missing in what? September of
92.
September of 92, in like February. So like 5 or 6 months later, they find these jeans, socks, and underwear in the woods off the side of the road. And the mom is convinced these are the jeans she was wearing.
Mm-hmm.
The somewhat shady cop that we heard from, who had like a weird like Black Lives Matter thing.
Yep.
Was very dismissive and said like, oh, I don't know, like they were too big, whatever, like they weren't the right size. And
which is a bonkers thing for a man to say about women's clothing, because like obviously he has no concept of women's clothing, if that's what you're going to say.
So Sarah says something to that effect of like, women's clothing sizing is weird. That is true. I know that to be true.
But also, we also are aware that Misty and her mom bought the jeans for herself. Misty was wearing them. I don't know if it was ever spoken about what size her mom was. I also don't know, was there any conversation about like how much money they had? Was this the pair that are on sale? Like, is there a chance that there was like a little bit of sewing going on to make them smaller? I'm just like, was there a belt used? Like, there is so much to discuss here. Was the whole like vibe at the time like a baggy jean and like having them a little bit big? Were they a small fitting? Like, there is just so many options here.
You tell me if you think this is crazy, but you could show me a pair of jeans and ask me if it was my pair of jeans, a pair of jeans that I hadn't seen in 6 months. And it might look like a pair of jeans that I own, but all jeans kind of look the same, especially if they've been sitting in a ditch for 5 months.
But they hadn't been.
Yeah, they had.
But I thought the point was that they were likely in a toolbox or in a car and someone got rid of them.
Maybe. I guess I just feel like you could have
either way, I feel like a mother who has bought clothes for her daughter, who has then said goodbye to her daughter on her first time letting her go out, and basically like she has a route home, she knows she's getting home, and she never sees her again, is going to have those jeans imprinted. Not just the jeans, but the underwear and the socks imprinted in her mind. And there is no way that her and Trina, her best friend, women know clothes better than men, generally speaking, stereotypically speaking, will be able to identify them. There's no way.
Maybe. I guess I believe the mom more than I believe the cop in this story. I didn't like the way, but I didn't like the way that it was presented in the podcast, because I feel like it could have been more definitively stated of like, oh, Diana knows like she, like it was this brand or it was this size that she would buy. Like it was so vague. And the sort of like the counter argument of were they or were they not her jeans, I felt like was presented in such vague terms that we as the audience weren't given anything really to hold on to other than sort of like broad generic statements.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And I also think like it went around in circles, and it would probably be one of my criticisms of this podcast, particularly the first few episodes. I felt like I heard the same freaking thing over and over again. Yes. And like it was eight episodes long. And while I really enjoyed going on a lot of the journey with Sarah Cailean, I really enjoyed hearing all the bits and pieces, especially towards the end. I felt like it could have been edited down, particularly to get rid of the duplicative material and statements. But yeah, okay, going back to the evidence podcast or episode, I think it's episode 3.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sarah Cailean didn't realize that the genes were called into question, or the clothes were called into question as like, were they or weren't they Misty's, until she is involved in this. And when she's involved in this, Diana is no longer around. So there is no way for her to definitively know.
Sure.
So she checks that there was like that brand was sold, because apparently Diana had said they are on sale in on some street. I can't remember what it was called. Some particular street. Was it like, wasn't Tulip, but like some particular street in, what's the name of the town?
Puyallup.
And she did look. Sarah did check that there was one particular shop there that sold, I think it was like Ethics jeans or something like that, that sold that brand of jeans at the time. So she did actually do her due diligence on that, and she did check that out. So like, I don't know what else she could have done.
Yeah, I think that's maybe fair. I think maybe I'm lumping this together with a lot of other things that I felt like Sarah presented very generically, or with some sort of like jokey, pithy kind of statement, as though that like was a good substitute for solid like, journalism or investigative like rigor. Like I thought a lot of her sort of explanations were like, well, women just know, or like women sizing is weird. And it's like, sure, that's generally true, but that's not science. Like that's not fact.
Oh, well, I mean, she could have explained it a little bit more. Like she could have taken a couple of minutes to say there are multiple people who will say if you go into the same store and you pick up, even now, maybe more so now, you pick up a size 8 or a size 6 or size whatever, same size, in 3 different pairs of jeans, and you hold them up, the difference could be inches. It's insane.
Sure. No, I know that to be true. But, and this is maybe not the best example of that, but this is one that they spend a lot of time on. But I feel like that was sort of the pattern throughout this podcast of she would say something and her defense would be something kind of like almost like a snide comment, which there was just too much of that. I think a lot of this is me coming back to like, I just don't care for her style. Like, I don't think I didn't like the tone of it. I didn't like the sort of sarcasm or snark. I didn't think it fit the sort of seriousness of the story. I feel like she often tried to kind of have it both ways. Like even with with Reuben and Reuben's family. So Reuben was the main suspect as she identified him. And the way she handled that family, I thought was weird.
I will agree with you here. There was a comment she made about the fact that Reuben's mother had 13 kids, and the way she made it was, I don't know, it was like, I can't even imagine that, which, I mean, look, neither can I, like both physically and emotionally and financially, but yeah, I do get that. I heard those remarks throughout. I don't necessarily agree with the rigor. I can see where you're coming from a stylistic point of view. I just don't fully agree with all of the points that you're saying. I felt like the way she dealt with Reuben's family, she did say, I have to remind myself that usually like there's a lot of evidence to back up that the family were involved in a lot of crime, that there was a lot of that there was kind of a vicious circle of like teaching the kids to go out and commit crime. Like that was a whole thing.
Right.
I've seen that. I've seen that play out in families. I've seen that as a teacher play out in families in a very similar pattern, and the impact it has on the kids. And when you see it with young kids, you can see them. It's cute and there's innocence and you've got empathy for them. But as soon as they grow up and they become teenagers, you know, people's empathy leaves because you expect them to know better. But if they're brought up in this entire environment, that's what they think they're supposed to do. It's them against everyone else. And that's their survival mechanism. And so like, I don't know. I do feel like that there was like an element of like maybe snobbery or like classism, or I don't know, insert word here to like look down on it. And there there could have been a little bit more of a pause and say, like, to take that in.
I think that's right.
I don't know.
I think that's right. I also, like, I feel like you walk away from this podcast sort of convinced that Ruben and his uncle of some type are responsible for this crime. She didn't really, I don't feel like she was particularly ambiguous about that. I feel like she kind of locked in on this farm, on this family, on this one person. And maybe he did it, but I don't know.
Did she lock in though? It's not like she spent the entire 8 episodes talking about him. She went down she spoke to so many different people, and like Ruben was kind of a common thread throughout, and maybe that's just like the editing in the end to keep the story like running on him. But you know, was it Michael? Is that Trina's boyfriend at the time?
Yeah, Michael.
Other than the fact that he was obviously busy at the time, that likely Misty was, I don't know, taken in a car. I don't know.
Right. We heard about that in episode 5, and then episodes 6, 7, and 8 were where she really locked in on Ruben and Ruben's family. And that's kind of my point, is that I feel like you're right. It wasn't the focus throughout the whole podcast, but once she kind of got there, once she kind of ruled out some of the other people like Michael, it was kind of all in on Ruben. I think that's the takeaway at the end of it. That's how I feel like how she left this story was I left this story thinking, okay, Misty is probably in a mine on that farm. Ruben's probably responsible, because that's what this story told me. That's what Sarah Cailean led me to believe.
But like, was it her or was it the evidence? Like, it's not as if she was like, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then like, I found, like, people who are members of his family reached out to her to say this. And then the people who bought the farm from his family are saying like, oh, after these weird things happened and these things have been taken, and like the red toolbox and the red paint or whatever, like this is all put in front of her. This isn't her making shit up. This is also not her deciding the parts she wants to choose. This is people telling her. She has so many primary sources, Jeff, in this show. So many in 8 episodes. And that variety allows her to like pull these pieces together. The variety of things that like the police never did. They never looked at them.
Does she though? She has a few primary sources. She has Trina. Trina was, I think, a fascinating interview, and I think that was great to hear. Most of the other people I feel like are more secondary sources. People who weren't there at the time, weren't alive at the time, weren't involved at the time.
The police officer dude that is questionable.
The questionable one. So Jason Visnaugh is the current or more recent police captain who she spent a lot of time with, who had investigated it but wasn't there at the time. Cloyd, I think, was the one who was there. The other person I want to mention was Sean Robinson, who was the reporter, who I thought had done a lot of work on this but wasn't a primary source. He was
that's fair.
He was a reporter.
Okay, yeah. A lot of sources. Okay, scrap the primary. Cut, snip, gone.
Okay.
Just sources. I feel like she had a lot of sources to work with, and she chased down, it seemed, a lot of leads. And yeah, some didn't lead her anywhere, but she did. I felt like she went along the routes. She was trying to chase things up, even figuring out that where the clothes were was so close to the farm that Ruben ended up at. Like, how did the police not know that Ruben had ended up at this farm? Like, bonkers.
But was it that close? I guess this is also part of my skepticism, was I feel like part of being what I've interpreted from the cold cases we listened to, and like I'm thinking back to also The Teacher's Pet as one where you had someone who was like hell bent on getting a house, like a backyard dug up and charges filed, and that had a different outcome in the end. Although there was never a body found, but the person that the guy thought did it went to prison, which is, I think that goes in a different folder of types of cases, right? Because that had some type of resolution of a form. But I feel like I was listening to this towards the end of it, like episode 8 or 7 or 8, and thinking like, yeah, part of this work, part of the work that she has chosen is really just sort of like grasping at a lot of straws and chasing down a bunch of things that are maybe connected, but maybe aren't connected at all. And specifically on this point about like the proximity of where the jeans were found to the farm, like she said this in multiple ways. She acknowledged this, but like this is a big rural area, and some of these things are really far apart, and maybe directionally, like they're in the same direction from where she disappeared, but I don't know. It's a lot of woods, like it's a lot of farms, it's a lot of open space, and I think some of these connections felt kind of thin to me, and kind of like, if she had a big pegboard with red string or whatever, like some of this would seem a little far-fetched.
But like,
Ruben comes across poorly, right? Like the whole thing of like the lie detector test and like not remembering like how he got to his grandmother's or whatever, like, but I feel like a different take on this would be, rather than try to go dig up stuff at the farm yourself, to really put the pressure on the police to do their fucking job, to close this case officially. And that's not the tactic she takes.
Well, okay. You know what I will often say in life is focus on the controllables.
Sure.
She doesn't likely have much control over the police, but what she could do from a podcasting point of view, she's like, okay, look, we need an end to this. We aren't going to get the police to move, and if they move, they're not going to move quickly. Okay, this isn't urgent because it's a cold case. It's not like they're looking for someone who they think is alive.
Right.
Them saying, we've a few options here, and posing this idea of like digging up a few areas, looking at the mines. Found that fascinating. Imagine like the mines like in the property, and then realizing the septic tank. And it's like, well, this is like I don't know how much crime dramas you've seen where the septic tank is in fact where the body goes. Going in there themselves and digging it out, like, Jesus, she must be in great shape is what I was thinking. That sounds like a lot of work.
It seems like a lot of work, but it also seems a little bit dramatic. I guess I felt like it was dramatic to no real end.
But if she found a body, what would you say?
Oh, totally different. Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, the same thing with walking around looking for those mines. Like, I feel like she was just sort of like, again, we're talking about a massive area. The police, she sort of, I feel like, reluctantly admit that the police had searched that area. And then she was like, well, but they searched like 40 acres and there was like 8 more acres. But they
didn't know that there was mines. That's a very different search.
Did they?
I don't think that they weren't sure that they knew. They have access to the land. The owners are saying go for it. They have no idea what the police are going to do with this information. Why wouldn't they? So, Jeff, if you and I decided to take on a cold case as podcasters, and we are in a position where we're like, look, we're at a dead end. We have some ideas. We have strong feelings about one particular person. We have access to property where we potentially think the body is. And there's one option, it's in the mine. Would you go look, or would you be like, nah, it's a bit too dramatic. Don't want that for our ending. Yeah, exactly. For everyone who can't see Jeff, which is all of our listeners, right now he's smirking and being like, yeah, you're right, you got me. Of course that's not what you would say. And then second of all, as soon as we can't find that and can't access it and we get our drone guy to go up, and then someone, the landowner, talks about the septic tank, we would be getting our shovels out, you'd be calling the lads in, and we'd be going heavy in on the shoveling. That is exactly what we would be doing. I don't care. Like, it's the only thing that they can control. And I think hats off to them. I think that was fascinating because they didn't wait for someone else to do it. They actually did it themselves. I was actually impressed. I thought they were just going to dig down to the septic tank, but then they just like kept going. That's fascinating. That was the best part. Did they find it? No, they didn't. Was it like sad? That must have been pretty like upsetting and deflating for Sarah Cailean as a podcaster who's put a lot of effort into this podcast and obviously wants to solve a case for the family and also, you know, selfishly for herself. What do you want from her? I feel like something weird is happening with your take on this podcast, because it feels to me like your expectation of what she can do with such a cold case, or what she should do with the information in front of her, is a bit wild. I get some of your points, but the rest of them I think are a bit off the wall, to be honest.
Okay. I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying about what we might do, but I also do think that is sort of an irresponsible thing to do. Like, I feel like to your broader point though, I do think I'm just more generally reacting negatively to this because I did not like the style of this podcast. I did not like the tone of it. I found it generally sort of unsatisfying. And I guess if I'm being super critical, I kind of felt like it was exploiting the story and exploiting Misty Copsey. And it just doesn't sit right with me. And would I feel differently if it had a better outcome? Yeah. But that's my point about, like, if you don't have that good outcome, maybe don't try to sell it. Maybe don't try to sell the story that you just spent a little bit of time working on, but didn't actually solve anything. Maybe don't try to profit off of that.
Okay. What? Like, so don't produce any podcasts on any cold cases. Is it just because it's a cold case and we're sick of hearing about cold cases that don't get solved?
I am a little tired of cold cases, but I think a different type of cold case story. We've done a lot of cold cases. Like, I've started to track them. I started to log them. And some of them I think work better as podcasts because they are just such unusual, kind of interesting stories that I think we learned, like the Doodler, for example. Like, the Doodler was one where, you know, that was the one about the serial killer in San Francisco in the 1970s. I mean, it was just such a kind of odd topic. It was one where there was no resolution in the end, right? Like, that one started a cold case, ended a cold case, but we learned about a time and a place and a culture in a way that I don't really think we did here. Like, I don't really feel like I learned anything here. Did you?
I learned about a 14-year-old girl who went missing and is never, like, the police didn't take seriously. And I'm sorry, I know you're looking at me like, don't do that because that's not fair, but that's exactly what it is.
Fair.
And like,
that's not
it
fair.
Is. Well, it's not. I don't think it's fair for you to say, like, I didn't learn anything. If honestly, you listen to a lot of podcasts, you read a lot of books. If you want to learn shit about cultures and whatever, go elsewhere. Or sometimes here, we will do that with podcasts. But this isn't the podcast for it. It was never going to be the podcast for it. And wanting this podcast, like, it never promised to be that. If this podcast set it up like, we are going to teach you about how Misty's Indigenous background impacted blah, blah, blah about her story, that's not what it was.
No.
It's not what it was. It never promised that. It absolutely never promised that. And I think, to be honest, you are holding, for some reason, this podcast, it seems, on a different pedestal, on to different expectations, or else maybe you just felt like it was going to be something different. I don't know.
I want these crimes to be worth people's time. And yes, the memory of this girl is important. I don't feel like this did that well. We may just have to agree to disagree on this. I don't feel like this podcast served her memory well.
It's so interesting because, like, Trina, her best friend, and was it Jean or Jana, her cousin, and then, like, who were speaking to Sarah Cailean, were speaking about her, and they both said she's lost in this. And we've heard this before in podcasts, Jeff. We've heard this so much, like, not even just in cold cases, like, the victim is lost in the story, like,
yeah.
Even in people telling their own story, like, I felt like I was lost in my own story, like, I wasn't being heard. It was the story before it was me. And And I feel like they both said it feels like we're getting to tell who Misty was outside of this. And I don't know, even from like a respect to the family and a respect to Misty point of view, I felt like this podcast did a pretty good job of that. Like Colton, Misty's brother, who by the end said, you know, I never really saw this ending. Like I never really imagined this being over. And all of a sudden I'm seeing like, oh, maybe. Like maybe this is, maybe there is an end. And I don't even know if he meant like we're going to solve, we're going to whatever. More just like maybe there's some more answers there.
I think that's a fair point. I do think there was space for that with Trina and Colton and the cousin. Like I do want to acknowledge that. But again, my more general takeaway is I feel like there was maybe not enough of that and too much of Sarah in this podcast. That's another thing we've been critical of other podcasts for, like the sort of balance between the host and the real people at the center of it. And I think to me this was the kind of the Sarah Cailean show. And this is the same criticism I have, like going all the way back to like Serial, and how Serial also ended up being too much about the host personality. It wasn't for me. This wasn't for me.
That's okay. I mean, I'll fight you for your opinion.
Does Reddit agree with me or you?
Reddit generally agrees with me, and so does the Spotify reviews. I'm going to read a few reviews.
The reviews that D found agree with D.
No,
Curious.
and actually, well, this is interesting. What's actually I think is interesting is I read reviews before I started listening. And you had said, like, why are we listening to this? And I was like, well, because I was looking for a podcast and saw one recommended, saw the reviews, and it was like, this is the best podcast I've listened to in so long, kind of thing. A couple of people did mention how there was no mention that it was the last episode, and it just kind of ended, so it felt incomplete because it just kind of ended, which, you know, I know you were just like dying for it to be over, but like whatever.
Sure.
Someone, Melissa Ferry, says it feels so good to hear people like Jenna, that's the cousin, explaining who Misty was with love and memories really makes her a person. Oh, people are just basically like, I want more, is more or less what people are saying on Spotify. And then, on Reddit. Has anyone else been listening to this podcast? I've been obsessed, and I hadn't heard of this cold case before. People are basically saying I absolutely loved it. Listen to her other seasons is what people are saying. The host having a background as a police detective combined with the tension of being from out of town and not having an in with local police made this show especially interesting. I thought it was one of the more thoughtful, respectful to the victim, and nicely paced true crime podcasts I've listened to in a long time. That's from Silly Impact 5445, who apparently goes by the name Sarah Cailean. No, I'm joking. There's a lot of good, but there was... Hippie Valley said, I'm currently listening, but having a hard time listening to Sarah Cailean. My attention drifts a lot. Not sure why she doesn't capture my attention as well as other podcasters do. And C Flounder 8437 responded saying, her voice doesn't have a lot of tonal variance. It goes up and down and she repeats that pattern a lot. I really struggle with that too. Lazy Effective 8359 says, I'd suggest speeding it up. See, this wasn't an issue that I had, Jeff, because I listened to this very, very fast. I find her pacing very slow and deliberate, and combined with the very modulated tone, it can lead to attention drift for sure. So maybe that could be something.
Agree with that.
A lot of people giving out about the police, which I don't know. I feel like maybe, am I just becoming so numb? Like my current assumption, especially when we're looking at a cold case, is likely the police did a terrible job.
Sure. Well, I mean, sort of the bias of the stories that we listen to. And I mean, Jacob Wetterling, that one really drove home just sort of how bad of a problem this is, more widespread. Yeah. So honestly, people are just like,
thinking that I'm right, which kind of tracks. And then someone else says, I wish every missing Indigenous girl had this much attention.
I do wish they'd explored more of that story.
But it didn't seem to be a factor that played into...
No, maybe there was no story there. Yeah, that's possible.
Anyway, that's it. That's all I have for you. Basically,
Okay.
everyone agrees with me, which, you know, tracks, and you are wrong.
All right. Well, if we've learned nothing else today, we've learned that.
Then I'm right, and you were incorrect.
At least in your own head. Yes.
In your head. If you are in your head at the moment, why not break that cycle and hop on to Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts and leave a comment, rate us. 5 stars would be fantastic. And while you're at it, get out of that head of yours and tell a friend all about this podcast or any other of our episodes that we have available to you. Thank you so much for continuing to support the show.
Next time, how about we do something a little bit different? How about we do a con story? A different type of con with a different type of scammer. We've talked about this before. We've talked about how my wife used to be a doula. I vicariously know a lot about doulas and that whole world. So we're going to learn about Cailean Braun. She is a pregnant young woman who's in crisis. She keeps getting support from different birth workers for an escalating series of disasters, from rape to baby loss, even a coma. But then the truth comes out. We're going to listen to a case that puzzled legal experts and raises some tricky moral and ethical questions. It's the con, Caitlyn's baby. That's on the next So Much Crime.
So little time.
So Much Crime, So Little Time is a production of Mind Glove Media. The executive producer is Paxton Caloriso. Our associate producer is Blythe Ty. Our theme music was composed by Vyacheslav Starostin. If you haven't done it yet, please subscribe to this show on your podcast app. And don't forget to give us a 5-star rating and a review. Even better, tell your friends. To join the discussion, look for us on social media. Check out the show notes for all the links. Thanks for listening.
Jeff clearly wrote that because intrepid is not a word that I would use, and it's stupid.